They say that the rust in Okaven didn't come from the rain. It came from the screaming. In this valley, the ironworks didn't just shut down when the money dried up. They evolved. You can smell it the moment you cross the county line. A heavy, metallic tang of copper, old pennies, and dried salt. It's the distinct, cloying scent of a town being slowly digested by its own industry. I found the first assembly in the flooded basement of the old Miller foundry. It wasn't a body, not anymore. It was a masterpiece of meat and machinery, a blueprint written in gristle. A local welder had been integrated. His spine had been stripped bare, the vertebrae fused directly to a rhythmic hydraulic press that kept pounding into the black dirt. His nervous system was draped across the main drive shaft like a shimmering golden web, her nerve endings sparking every time the gears ground together. The locals don't call the police. They bring silent offerings of scrap metal, braided hair, and roadkill to the factory gates at midnight. Have you ever seen a circle that shouldn't exist? A shape so wrong it makes your teeth ache and your vision blur just by looking at its edges? The Sisters of the Gear don't use chalk or salt for their circles. They use pressurized steam, molten lead, and human bile. I watched them tuning a young girl, bolted to a massive brass frame, her skin stretched so thin it looked like translucent yellowed parchment. Every time the massive overhead gears turned with a wet, heavy thud, her ribs would expand. They weren't killing her. They were using her lungs as a biological bellows to stoke a fire that doesn't burn orange or red. It burns a color I cannot describe. A bruised, ultraviolet hunger that eats the shadows. The math of the machine is fundamentally broken. I counted the teeth on the main drive gear, 43. An impossible prime number for any machine meant to function in this reality. But it was working, humming a low frequency that made the very marrow in my bones feel like it was liquefying. I broke into the foreman's office, expecting ledgers and payroll. Instead, I found the liturgy of the machine. The walls were draped in the living map, a sprawling diagram of Okaven where the streets were drawn as veins, and the town square was marked as a primary valve. The sisters aren't just crazy, they are precise. They've calculated the exact weight of collective despair required to thin the veil between worlds. I saw sketches for the Great Piston, a device designed to be fueled by the adrenaline of a heart that never stops beating. They've found a way to keep a nervous system firing indefinitely through a loop of electrical agony. They call it sanguine engineering. To them, we are just soft parts for a hard god. They aren't worshipping the cosmic dark. They are trying to industrialize it. They want to pull the outer hunger through the hole and strap it into the engine. The breach didn't start with a bang. It started with a taste. Suddenly, my mouth was full of the flavor of rusted copper and burnt hair. The air felt like cold, wet silk sliding down my throat. I looked down at my hands and screamed. My fingernails were turning into serrated iron teeth clicking against my skin. The sisters stood in the center of the foundry, their bone masks vibrating so violently they blurred into a dozen faces at once. The gravity in the room shifted 45 degrees, throwing me against a wall that felt like warm, beating muscle. The sound was the frequency of a star dying, tuned to the pitch of a child's sob. The machine was burning the very concept of linear time. A drop of blood fell from my nose and floated upward, unfolding into a tiny, screaming fractal. We aren't in Okaven anymore. We are in the throat of the machine. The roadkill, the scrap, the missing neighbors. They weren't being eaten. They were being machined. In the center of the foundry floor stood the Great Piston, a cathedral of the grotesque. I recognized the foreman's daughter. She had been unfolded. Her nerve endings were sparking, and her eyes were darting, tracking the sisters as they applied more lubricant, a mixture of motor oil and liquefied bone marrow. The sisters were singing a dissonant, screeching frequency that made my skin begin to peel back in neat geometric strips. They were bolting more parts to the pillar, limbs from the local cemetery, reanimated by the ultraviolet fire. The machine didn't just move, it ached. It was a giant synthetic lung, gasping for the air of a dimension that hasn't existed for 1 billion years. Every revolution of the gear teeth tore fresh holes in reality, revealing a sea of writhing, eyeless things waiting in the beyond. I turned for the exit, but the door wasn't there anymore. In its place was a massive, vibrating valve made of calcified rib cages. The air was so thick with the purple hunger that I had to chew the oxygen just to swallow it. And then, I felt the first bolt. It didn't hurt, it felt right. A rusted iron spike drifted through the air and pressed itself into my shoulder. My flesh didn't bleed, it molded around the metal, welcoming the intrusion. I am becoming a part. The sisters didn't see a victim, they saw a missing gear. To see the beyond, you must first become a lens, one whispered. My bones began to soften, lengthening and twisting into the shape of a tripod. I can feel the pressure of the boiler in my chest and the spark plugs in my brain. I'm not losing my mind, I'm just being upgraded. The transformation is absolute. Okaven is gone. There is only the engine. From my new vantage point, wired into the foundry smokestack, I can see the beyond pouring through the breach like black oil. It isn't a chaotic invasion, it's a hostile takeover. The Eldritch entities are the shareholders of a reality we were merely squatting in. The Sisters of the Gear have successfully industrialized the infinite. Below me, the great piston is hammering at the speed of thought, churning souls into fuel that smells like ozone and ancient regret. We have provided a physical body, a chassis of rust and bone, capable of holding their terrible, pressurized consciousness. The stars above are rearranging themselves into the shape of a serrated blade. We are a printing press, stamping the image of the void onto the surface of the earth. So you've been watching for a while, scanning the screen for seams in the story. You think you're safe because you're on the other side of the glass, but Sanguine engineering doesn't need you to be in the room. It just needs you to observe the frequency. Do you feel that slight vibration in your palms? That's not electricity. That's the red soil rhythm. It's been tuning you for the last 8 minutes. Every frame of this film was a measurement. The sisters build gates out of attention. By watching the machine, you've become a part of its circuit, the peripheral witness. Don't bother looking behind you. But the next time you close your eyes to sleep, listen to your own heartbeat. Notice how it started to sound a little more metallic. Welcome to the assembly line. We've been waiting for your parts.
You heard it, but it's not gone. The static remembers you. Subscribe if you want to hear the next echo.